garden tour. It's the end of May after the Memorial Day weekend, 2023. We have my Japanese maple that I brought with me from Chicago. I've had this for about 4 years. That's Rhode Island Red. The leaves are a little bit small this year, but I think it was because in the last couple of years, or last year, I had it in a smaller container, a little very small terracotta container. So I think this year, after transplanting it in a larger pot, I'm hoping that the larger leaves are gonna come back again. We have 2 lambs-ear plants here that survived the winter in pots in our Charles Street apartment last year, and they got planted out and they are exhibiting very different growth habitus. This one's very leggy for some reason, and that one's kind of staying nice and low, but they both seem to be thriving really well out here in this western facing bed here. That's also lavender that successfully overwintered and from last year and got planted. This is a tea bush. It's a Camellia sinensis, and these leaves up here, these fresh leaves up here, can actually be dried and brewed into fresh tea. And so it's got a little bit of, looks like a possible fungal issue, maybe like a copper spot or black spot type issue, but otherwise it's a pretty hardy plant and most likely it's going to survive. His twin sibling on this side seems to be doing much better, and for whatever reason that black spot has spared this plant. But very happy in this location, and it's going to grow into a giant bush. This bed up here had a little bit of a facelift. This is I believe it's a Crimson Queen lace leaf Japanese maple that we have affectionately named Bobby because of his bowl haircut. He definitely needs a bit of a trim and just to kind of remove some of that dense foliage to bring out some light into some of the lower branches, and then just aesthetically prune it a little bit more. But I thought that underneath, because of the bowl cut, was an opportunity to do a little bit of gardening, and planted these kind of baby stairs looking ground cover, and it's already starting to creep around and start to kind of hopefully carpet this area, or at least try to knit together eventually over here. And so the overall effect would be kind of a Japanese maple with kind of like a mossy ground cover underneath. So we'll see. That's the idea. We'll see if it's actually going to happen. And then over here is Hokanoa grass, which I bought last year and had it up in pots in Charles Street, and so they are just taking off in this clump over here. Looks a little bit more pale than this one because I think this one is a little bit happier underneath the shade of this Japanese maple, but otherwise they seem to be growing. We planted this lavender plant this year, and so it's definitely going crazy over here, and you can see this little tiny little bloom here on this one and that one. It's really beautiful. And then I planted this Nepeta catmint, and the bees love it. They're not out today, but normally every morning I'm out here, they're just out in full force, and they really like this plant. This over here was this kind of like blue flower. It's kind of done flowering at the moment, but maybe about a week ago it was just covered in these blue flowers. It was really beautiful, and the previous owners had planted it. I think these are lilies, perhaps tiger lilies, day lilies. We're not sure yet, but they were left over here. So, oh, look, There's a bee. It's got a kind of like a red butt. Oh, there it goes. It's gone. Over here, it's kind of more of an exposed area. Wanted some ground cover to kind of mimic the ones over here. And this guy, these ones over here are actually sedum. So if you look really closely, you can kind of see the fleshy leaves, characteristic of sedum. And so this one will hopefully kind of carpet the area as well. I wanted to keep the design of this space with low plants, nothing that grew too high. The previous owners had these tulips that were really pretty, but they all kind of came up to about knee height, very tall, and it kind of blocked these beautiful stones, and the whole design was just very, one level. It didn't have any much of a design to it, and so I ripped out all of the tulip bulbs and planted these low-lying ground covers instead, so you can kind of see the hardscaping. You can see the rocks and everything, which I think are a really nice design element. And then those guys up there are heather plants, which will bloom these little kind of very subtle purple flowers later in the season. More of this lilies that the previous owners left. I left here. And this is a hellebore. It's the first thing that blooms as we're coming out of winter, kind of like January, February here. And these are actually false flowers, I believe, but they are these kind of interesting dark purple flowers that they're fading, but it's a healthy looking mature plant, and I didn't have the heart to kind of dig it out. Kind of looks interesting. These are some sedum ground cover plants that Josh bought, and these ones are really interesting because they will close up at night, and then during the day they'll start opening, and you can kind of see one is starting to open. And for whatever reason, these ones haven't started to bloom yet, so I'm hoping that maybe later in the season it'll bloom. Up here is kind of like my little flower zone here. This is a David Austin rose. It's called Grace, and it's gonna have kind of like a yellow, peachy kind of color, and you can see the first bud right there. And it's not focusing, but here we go. So that's our very first bud, and I already noticed in the last couple of weeks that there was already an aphid problem. There were a bunch of these little kind of chartreuse green little bugs that were all lined up, sucking up the sap of my rose. And so I ended up going and purchasing some ladybugs, which you can see right there. They've kind of like a little cluster of them there, and they have just found a home in this rose pot, and hopefully going to town and hopefully reproducing and making baby ladybugs, which are voracious aphid eaters. And so I released these guys 2 evenings ago, and they are still around and haven't all flown away, but you can see in this marigold that it's hiding in the petals there. They're all up in this plant here. So these marigolds kind of really pop against this blue container. Some creeping Jenny, which hopefully will kind of cascade over this pot and give it a nice, really lush look. I'm really proud of this plant here. This one's called Escaviosa, and it is a beneficial pollinator magnet. Apparently all different types of beneficial insects really love this particular plant, and it's a perennial. And again, we had it in a container last year in Charles Street, and I actually had 2 of these plants, and one of them survived. I thought it was actually a mum that I brought from Trader Joe's around Halloween season. You know, they put them out and they're really cheap at that time of year, and I thought it was actually a mom that survived, so I actually didn't even water it that much because I was hoping it would just die, but it wouldn't die, and it just came back, and now it's flowering. It's actually a pretty long flowering perennial, as I learned last year, and it's going to continue to pump out these little buds that are going to turn this kind of like purplish blue, and that's a wavelength of light that a lot of insects really gravitate towards, including butterflies. So hoping to see some butterflies around this garden next year. And then this here is a giant yarrow plant, and it's also a perennial that does really well and attracts a lot of pollinators, and it's sort of a safe haven for a lot of beneficial kind of insects like these ladybugs. And you'll see that the ladybugs that I released have found their way into this yarrow plant and have burrowed itself kind of on the underside. And there's a whole cluster of them here, which I find very interesting. And you know, this there's this bug called spittlebug, and they leave these kind of like nasty, it's almost like looks like somebody spat on the leaves, but it's actually the nymphs of this bug. They kind of, to protect themselves, they kind of create these clusters of spittles, and they slowly kind of feast on the plants. And so I'm hoping that the ladybugs and the ladybug nymphs, if they reproduce, are going to go to town. And then I bought this sort of spilling, vining, flowering plant because it kind of matches the marigolds, just to kind of spill out of the yarrow. So little flower containers there. Back here we have kind of like the seedling area. So we grew these purple basils from seed, and we also, oh, hi Rainy. Okay. And then these basils here, Josh's friend Mike Everett gifted us a Trader Joe's basil plant that he stubbornly kept alive, and turned from an annual to a perennial, and kept it inside until it flowered, and you know, we collected the seeds, and then so now we're planting these seeds. This is a Korean pepper plant that my nurse Preet gifted me, and then over here we have 3, I think 3 of them are habaneros, and then, or jalapenos rather, and then 3 of them are something else that I don't remember. But yeah, so there's 6 pepper plants, and we did buy these as starts, so we did not grow these from seeds. One of my co-workers, Joel Carey, he is also a West Seattle resident, and he's really known for growing dahlias. I kind of call him the Dahlia King, and he actually gifted me 4 tubers, and so I have them sort of labeled here. This one's called Rip City. This one I believe is Bluebell. This one is called Cafe Olay, and then this one's called Purple World. And Purple World has already started to sprout, and you can see that it's already sprouted, and then the Cafe Olay wants to sprout from this right here. There's like a little bit of a shoot coming out there, and then you can sort of see that there's one shoot coming up from this Bluebell, actually 2 shoots over here, and it's been about 10 days where it just looked like a you know, dried tuber, and life is already coming on. You can sort of see in this rhipsody, there's you know, two little sort of purple shoots coming up. So I'm really excited about these dahlias. I've never grown them before. I think this year we're gonna leave them in pots because in the beds back there, there aren't any, there's no room for them right now. There's a bunch of seedlings, which you'll see. This one's a really special plant, actually. So this one came from Cosmos seeds that Josh harbored from like 6-7 years ago. He grew it on a balcony, and you know, Cosmos are, they are annuals, and so you have to save the seeds. So he stubbornly saved the seeds and didn't even refrigerate them or anything. And for some reason, after 6 years, those seeds are still viable and produced these healthy looking starts. And so I'm calling them Joshy's Magic Cosmos here. So I don't know what color they're gonna be. They might be a mixed color, we'll see, but these ones are gonna be special, and they're gonna kind of have a special place in our garden once they grow up. This is our little seed tray experiment. These over here are peppers, and I already kind of dug up a lot of the seedlings that have done well and have transplanted them to the, you know, the bigger trees over there. But the ones that are still left in here are peppers, and they're probably not gonna do anything this year. It's not hot enough for them to thrive or do well, so well, we'll see. Over here is our kind of hummingbird feeder area. We have some mint that has come back from last year, and it's thriving. This is another yarrow plant. This one's much smaller than the one out there, but hopefully will produce kind of like an orange flower. This is a new planter that I got. This is something called like a cigar plant that hummingbirds are supposed to really like. They kind of, you know, suck the nectar from the sort of tubular structure, the flower. And this is some kind of salvia that also produces flowers that have these like kind of long straw-like stems, flowers. And this is just some marigolds, just to kind of produce some ground cover. And our hummingbird feeder over here. We figured that it would be nice to, our cat likes to hang out by the banquette over here, and he likes to look outside, and so we figured that maybe we would give him some cat TV and attract some hummingbirds and pollinators, and you know, he'll just stare out the window all day and live his best life. This is a strawberry plant that the previous owners left, and they actually had them in the beds back there, the raised beds, and I dug them up and I put it in this terracotta pot because they were kind of sprawled out and they didn't really look, you know, kind of great there. So I brought them out, and look, it is May 31st today, and we already have a ripe strawberry. This ripe strawberry was south facing, so I turned the pot around so that these green ones will hopefully start to ripen. And miraculously, our dog has not eaten the strawberry yet, so even though he sniffed it a couple of times. This is a plant that we bought from a secret nursery on Salvie Island last summer. It's not doing the best, but there's a really interesting story, not of this plant, but of this plant over here. So when we lived in Charles Street, we lived by a park, and there were some crows, and there were other seagulls and other birds that kind of lived in the park next door. And we would notice that up on our rooftop garden, for some reason, we would see little peanuts just like dropped into the soil of our containers. And we didn't know, like, we thought like, were the neighbors, you know, eating peanuts and just like throwing the shells into our rooftop, or like what was going on? And later on we developed a hypothesis that maybe it was the birds or maybe it was the crows, because sometimes crows leave things for people. And so somebody or something left a peanut that hadn't been eaten in the soil of one of our containers, and this one, and it just dropped, and I never touched it. I guess I never even knew it was there. And then look, this peanut actually rooted down and is rooting down and like growing in this soil, which is just incredible to me. I never knew that this is how peanuts grew, but my great grandma was a peanut farmer, and you know, she would probably say like, oh yeah, of course, that's what peanuts do. But I've never seen peanuts grow, and this is my first time, and it's was planted by some kind of bird or Mother Nature. These are some plants that I picked from the community garden, some flowers. So most of these flowers are the bolted seed heads of lettuce and other kind of like leafy green vegetables. They otherwise, you know, are not going to harm the plant, and in fact they're bolting already, so you can see that they're actually quite beautiful, these yellow flowers, and those kind of this cluster of the white ones there, and these kind of like little almost like red clover looking sort of weeds that I took up. And then this is a garlic scape over here. You can actually eat this, the top flowering stalk of a garlic plant. And then some, of course, some poppies too that kind of grow like weeds here. And I put them in a flower pot, and they've actually been doing really well for, I think, more than a week now. Nothing too interesting here. Just some dill, some Italian parsley, curly parsley rather, and then these are those mums that I was telling you about that survived the winter. And these are some baby's tears that I bought from when we were living in Boston Street, so 2 apartments ago, and it's still alive. There was a camellia here that unfortunately died. I used this as a ground cover, but this has done really, really well. And then this is an Alberta spruce that I just bought to honor a cat that we lost. Two holiday seasons ago. So we just he really loved Christmas trees, and so that was something that we kind of planted in honor of Kaji. Over here is kind of like our shed. And I have 2 Japanese maples here. One is obviously much smaller. This one here. And this one's new from last year, overwintered up in Charles Street. And it seems to be thriving and doing well. It's sending up new shoots. And we had originally put it in this really dark light well, kind of like on the first floor, barely got any light and wasn't looking healthy last year. But this year it's really rebounded. This guy over here, this one's an Emperor one, and again, he's just really doing super, super well here in this pot, and we had moved him from Charles Street as well. Hi, Rainy. Hey, Joshi. I'm doing a garden tour video. Okay, Rainy's gonna help. This one over here is a hosta that we bought from a bamboo specialty nursery last weekend. And I've always wanted a kind of like a big, luscious hosta up on a pot. And it looks really, really good. And this here is a fern that we bought from, again, 2 apartments ago. So not the Charles Street one, but Boston Street. And it's still continuing to do really, really well. This little flower box here is something that I created about 2 weekends ago, and it has a lot of my favorite plants in here. So more Hokanoa grass. This variety is solid color. It's not variegated like the one that's in the front. And then this one's called a Senecio Angel Wing, and it's got these like fuzzy, almost like lamb's ear texture, and it really just kind of pops in a sort of like a dark spot. And then these ones will eventually grow really tall. So this is a Fatsia japonica, and I just bought these really, really small pots, and they are hopefully just gonna grow taller and then kind of fill out this space up here, allowing room to breathe for some of these underplantings over here. Yeah, so some deer fern, and I don't remember what these are called here, but it'll come to me later. This tree over here is a magnolia, so it's me and Josh's favorite tree, and we bought it when there was only, I think, 1 or 2 flowers left. It's like these pink flowers, and they're kind of like almost like a candle, call it like a candlestick, like really kind of large blooms here. Very young tree, but we're excited to see it kind of grow. Right now it's about a little shorter than I am, so maybe like 5 foot something, a couple of inches, and hopefully next year it'll be as tall as Josh, and then hopefully it'll just continue to take off. So this is a tree that we planted ceremonially together. Rainy is a cow. He likes to eat grass. These over here are wildflower seedlings that we just kind of scattered. This was probably late April, so it's been about a month. And we're already seeing kind of like cosmos seedlings coming up. I'm not sure what these ones are, but those ones with the little black spots on those leaves are actually sunflowers, and they are going to produce these like kind of dark, they call it chocolate colored sunflowers, and so I'm really excited about those. Those I started in the seed trays, and then I transplanted them into these beds, and I'm deliberately putting them in the back of the bed so that when they grow up a little bit taller, they're not going to shade out some of the other seedlings here. And so these raised beds the previous owners put up here, and they left a little birdhouse, which I haven't seen any visitors. This shrub over here doesn't look like much right now, but to our surprise, it's a lilac. And so you can see the spent blooms from the lilac, which is Josh's mom's favorite flower, one of her favorite flowers, and so it kind of means a lot to us. Hey, Rainy, out of there, out of there. And this is a blue spruce. It's a very beautiful tree. You can start to see it's pretty massive. And underneath the tree, I thought it was a really nice opportunity to do kind of like a shade garden type thing. And so the previous owners had this edging, kind of like a straight line over there. And so we actually just dug out a little bit of grass like over here, and then we pulled the edging just like a foot over into this sort of rounded bed, and it's given us an opportunity to put kind of shade-loving plants here. So we've got 3 hostas, we have a good luck kitty, we have some ferns, and we have a bleeding heart. It has these like little heart tassels, flowers. And then this sort of bamboo looking thing is actually a fern, and they call it a Jurassic Velociraptor fern, which is really cool. And when it first starts, it sends out these little sort of plastic looking shoots from the base, and it feels like plastic, but it's actually plant material. It's really interesting. And then there's a little solar powered pagoda that Josh bought from Amazon. And then this is the second tree that we planted. This was a tree that we found at West Seattle Nursery, and it's also an emperor one. It's got an interesting kind of growth habitus, and so we just have the main stem kind of growing into our yard, creating these layers. And sometimes in the morning when there's the light coming in from the east into this direction, the bottom parts of these leaves just kind of glow in the different layers, so it's really beautiful. This bed over here is the cosmos bed. So Josh's favorite flower is the cosmos, and so we bought these starts from a nursery up north called Swanson's, and we just basically bought their entire stock of cosmos, and then we planted them in the back, and then more seedlings in the front over here. So wildflower seedlings. Hi, Rainy. Rainy, want to sit? Sit. Come on, Rainy, sit. Okay, he's being a bad boy for the camera. But, you know, these beautiful flowers, all different varieties. This one's just beautiful with that kind of almost inviting the pollinators to land in the middle. Okay. And then this is like the edge of the garden. We wanted to kind of build some fencing between us and the neighbors eventually, but there's a window over here that goes into our living room, and our neighbor's window is just right there. So we just needed something to block out and create some privacy. So we went to a bamboo specialty nursery last weekend, and we bought this beautiful clumping bamboo variety that we're really excited to plant this year. So it'll kind of go in ground, and then we will try to let it sort of grow this season, and then next season we're gonna divide it, and then we're gonna just kind of arrange the clump so it's a little bit more of a rectangular shape than like a circular shape. So we'll have 2 clumps from one eventually, but it's just very beautiful. All right, that is our garden.